I ran across the airport gate, through the rain, away from everything I had built with him. My suitcase struck my heel with every step, but I did not stop. The final boarding call echoed above me. I did not turn around. I could not, because if I looked back, I might lose my courage. My hands were shaking as I gave the woman my passport. She smiled. I did not smile back. My face felt stiff. My chest was tight. I walked down the tunnel to the plane with heavy feet and a wild, restless heart. Outside the window, rain covered the glass. The city I had lived in for 10 years disappeared into gray clouds. Somewhere below was the apartment I had cleaned, the job I had given up, the man I had once believed in. All of it was fading now, like a life that had never truly belonged to me. Inside the plane, I sat still. My breath was short but steady. I had no tears left. I had cried them all in silence over the past 2 years. At dinner, in bed, in the bathroom with the door closed. I had begged for connection with my silence. I had begged for change with my patience. But nothing came. He never hurt me with his hands. He hurt me by not seeing me at all. There were no big fights, no shouting, just cold evenings, empty words, and long nights waiting for a door that opened late. I watched the love disappear from his eyes, and I stayed. I stayed because I was afraid. But fear cannot be the reason to stay. The decision came one quiet morning. He had left his coffee half full, again. I looked at the cup, then at my reflection in the kitchen window. My eyes looked tired, my skin pale. My mouth did not smile anymore. That morning, I packed one suitcase. I booked a flight to a country I had never been to. I left a short note on the table. No anger, no explanation, only truth. And then I walked out of the door. Now, thousands of feet above the ground, I was finally alone. And in that loneliness, I felt something unexpected. Peace. Not joy. Not yet, but the kind of silence that does not hurt. When the plane landed, the air smelled like metal and cold rain. I stepped out into a new world. The language was different. The streets unfamiliar. I had no one waiting for me, but I felt ready. I took a train from the airport to a small town I had only seen online. I had found a part-time job there, teaching English to children. The pay was low, but it came with a place to sleep and a warm meal each day. That was enough. The room was above the school. It was small, with one window, a single bed, and a wooden table. I unpacked slowly. A sweater, a photo, a book. The room was quiet. Too quiet, but not in a painful way, in a free way. The first morning, I woke up to birds outside. The school was already filled with soft voices and small footsteps. I watched the children run across the playground. Their laughter felt strange at first. But then I smiled. I had not smiled like that in a long time. After a week, I started to learn the names of the children. I began to understand simple words in their language. I learned how to buy food, how to ask for directions, how to be still without fear. In the afternoons, I sat by the window with a cup of tea and watched the trees move in the wind. I no longer waited for footsteps at the door. I no longer stared at my phone. If you are finding this story meaningful, I hope you will follow along. These stories help you learn English through real feelings and life experiences. Please consider subscribing to this channel. It means a lot. One evening, I walked to a nearby market. The sky was orange and the streets were quiet. I held a small list in my hand. Eggs, bread, milk, simple things, but they felt like new steps in my life. Each one proof that I was doing this on my own. The woman at the fruit stall smiled and taught me the name for apple. I repeated it slowly. She laughed softly and gave me one for free. I said thank you in my own language. She nodded. In that moment, I felt less alone. That night, I ate in silence. But this silence did not feel empty. It felt earned. It felt honest. I had worked hard for this quiet. I had walked through fear and confusion to reach it. Some nights, I still remembered him. Not because I missed him, but because my body had been trained for years to expect his absence. I remembered the space beside me in bed, the way he would sit at dinner without looking up. I remembered how I used to search his face for signs of love. Now, I looked in the mirror for signs of strength. It was not easy. Some days I doubted myself. Some nights I missed the comfort of routine, even if it had been painful. But I kept going. I made tea. I went to work. I folded my clothes. I smiled at strangers. I slept without waiting for someone to come home. One afternoon, it rained again. I stood by the window and watched drops run down the glass. I thought about where I had been a month ago. I thought about the woman who could not speak, who could not leave, who was afraid of change. That woman was still part of me, but she was no longer in control. I had changed my story. I had chosen something new. I was still healing, but I had begun. If you are finding this story meaningful, I hope you will follow along. These stories help you learn English through real feelings and life experiences. Please consider subscribing to this channel. It means a lot. Days passed slowly at first. I moved through them like someone learning how to walk again. I wrote new shopping lists. I washed my clothes by hand. I opened windows in the morning to let the light in, and I closed them at night with care. These small tasks became my new anchors. I began to recognize the rhythm of this place. Church bells rang at 7 each morning. The bakery next door opened at 8. Children ran down the street at noon. I listened, I observed, and I began to feel part of something, even if I could not yet speak it. Each evening, I wrote short notes in my notebook, not poems or deep thoughts, simple lines, what I saw, what I felt, what I wanted to remember. One note said, "I smiled back today." Another said, "I forgot his name for 5 whole minutes." The old life still showed up in my mind sometimes, but it no longer stayed all day. It came like a cloud, passed quietly, and disappeared. I let it. On weekends, I took long walks through the nearby park. The trees were tall and quiet, and the air was clean. I liked to sit on a bench with a sandwich and watch people walk their dogs. No one knew me. No one expected anything from me. I could be invisible or seen. It was my choice. Once I saw a couple walking hand in hand. They laughed and bumped shoulders, and for a moment I felt a deep emptiness rise inside me. I turned away, not because I envied them, but because I remembered a time when I thought that was possible for me too. I had believed in love. I had believed in forever. But forever is a word we often say before we understand what it really means. My story was different now, and I was still writing it. One Sunday, I helped a neighbor carry groceries up the stairs. She thanked me in her language. I smiled and said a few words I had practiced. She beamed and invited me in for tea. I hesitated, then followed her. Her home was warm and smelled of bread and old books. She showed me photos of her grandchildren. She did most of the talking, but I listened with interest. When I left, she gave me a small plant in a clay pot. I carried it to my room and placed it on the windowsill. That plant became something more than decoration. It became a symbol of roots, of care, of the life I was beginning to grow. I started to enjoy the lessons at the school. The children asked funny questions, and I tried to answer them with pictures and hand signs. They laughed often. They were not afraid to be wrong. Watching them reminded me that it was okay to learn slowly. It was okay to make mistakes. Each day, I felt a little stronger, a little more present. I no longer checked the time expecting anyone. I no longer counted the days since I had left. I simply lived them. One night, I lit a candle by the window. I sat beside it and watched its flame move gently with the wind. My suitcase stood in the corner, still half full. I had not unpacked everything. Part of me had been waiting to be sure I was staying. But that night, I opened it. I took out the last dress, the one I had worn on our last anniversary. It was soft and blue and full of memories. I folded it slowly and placed it in the drawer with the others. That was the moment I knew. I was not going back. I was no longer someone's second choice. I was no longer someone's background. I was my own story now. The days began to move faster. The fear I had felt when I arrived started to fade, replaced by small moments of comfort. I knew which bus to take to the market. I could ask for bread without pointing. I even started using the right coins without looking confused. These little things mattered more than I had expected. They made me feel capable again. At school, the children grew more confident. They raised their hands more. They repeated words with pride. Some of them began to write small sentences. I watched them with quiet joy. Each word they learned reminded me that I, too, was learning how to speak again. Not in their language, but in my own voice. The other teachers began to include me in their routines. Marek often brought 2 cups of tea in the afternoon and left one on my desk. Lydia shared her lunch with me on Fridays. They did not ask about my past. They only spoke about the present. That was something I needed. People who saw me as I was, not who I had been. One morning, I stayed late after class to clean up a mess of papers and crayons. As I stacked the chairs, I realized I was humming a song. I had not noticed I was doing it. That small act, a tune in my throat, felt like a kind of return. I had been gone from myself for so long that even a melody felt like a discovery. I began to walk in the evenings, not just to go somewhere, but to be somewhere. The village was small, but each corner held something new. A faded mural on a wall, a bench covered in leaves, a window filled with old dolls. I walked until the light changed and the air turned colder. Then I returned home with a quiet heart. One Sunday afternoon, I took the train to the next town. It was larger, noisier. There was a bookstore there that sold second-hand novels in English. I picked one up and opened it just to feel the weight of the pages. The story was about a woman who moved across the world to start again. I smiled. Sometimes the books we choose tell us more about ourselves than we expect. The woman at the counter wrapped the book in brown paper and tied it with string. I carried it back to the platform like a gift. On the ride home, I watched the fields pass and thought about all the things I had once feared. Being alone, being forgotten, being lost. And yet here I was, alone, but not lonely, unseen, but not forgotten, lost maybe, but also found. Back in my room, I opened the book and read the first chapter aloud. The sound of my own voice filled the space. I had always been quiet in that old life, careful not to speak too much, careful not to disturb. But now I could speak as loud or as soft as I wished. The room did not mind. One morning, it snowed. Not a heavy snow, but enough to cover the rooftops and quiet the streets. I stood at the window with my tea and watched children build small snowmen outside the school. Their joy was simple and pure. I remembered winters in my old home, how I had once wished for moments like this with him, but those moments never came. He was too busy, too tired, too distant. Now I did not need to wait for anyone. Winter brought colder nights, but my room stayed warm. I used extra blankets and wore thick socks. I wrote longer notes in my notebook. I began to describe my feelings more clearly. I wrote about fear, but also about strength. I wrote about loneliness, but also about courage. One evening, I received a message from an old friend. She had heard I was gone. She asked if I was okay. I stared at the message for a long time. I wanted to tell her everything, but I also wanted to keep this new life for myself a little longer. I wrote back simply, "I am okay. I hope you are too." That night, I dreamed I was back in our old apartment. The lights were off, the air was cold. He was sitting at the table reading a newspaper. I stood in the doorway waiting for him to look up. He never did. I called his name, but he did not hear me. When I woke up, my hands were clenched. My jaw was tight. But I was not afraid. Dreams are only memories dressed in silence, and I had already walked away from the truth of them. Weeks passed. I celebrated my birthday quietly. I bought a small cake and lit a single candle. I made a wish, not for love or success or answers. I wished only for peace. I blew out the candle and sat in the stillness. That was enough. By spring, the village began to bloom. Flowers appeared in windows. People opened their doors wider. The children came to school with muddy shoes and bright eyes. I walked more often, sat longer in the park, read in the sun. My hair grew longer. My heart grew softer. One afternoon, Marek asked if I wanted to visit the river nearby. I said yes. We walked together in silence, each step slow and easy. The river was calm, and the sky above it was soft with light. We sat on a low stone wall and shared a small bag of nuts. He spoke about his childhood, his favorite books, his quiet weekends. I listened. Then I spoke too. About the sea near my old home, about my mother's garden, about the songs I used to sing as a child. We did not talk about the past that hurt. We talked about the past that shaped us. When we stood up to leave, he looked at me and smiled, not with pity, not with curiosity, but with kindness. It was the kind of smile that says, "I see you." I nodded, and that was enough. I did not know what the future would bring. I did not know how long I would stay, but for the first time, I did not need answers. It was enough to walk beside the river, to feel the earth under my feet, to know that I had come this far. The weeks turned into months. I no longer marked time by pain or fear. I counted it in seasons, in the softness of the air, in the way the sunlight warmed my window in the mornings. Spring brought longer days, and with them, a deeper stillness inside me. I began to feel something new. It was not joy, not yet, but it was strength, a quiet kind, the kind that builds slowly and hides in small victories. I could now speak full sentences in their language. I could join in staff meetings and understand jokes. I could laugh without feeling like I was pretending. At the school, the children changed too. They came running to greet me each morning. They made drawings of us together. In those pictures, I had big eyes and a smile that stretched across my face. I hung the drawings on my wall. It was the first time I had decorated a space with something that felt like love. On weekends, I visited the bookstore in the next town. The woman there began to know my face. She set books aside that she thought I might like. One day, she asked if I had ever written anything of my own. I told her I used to write long ago, before I stopped believing my voice mattered. That night, I sat at my desk with an old notebook. I wrote about the rain, about the sound of the train station when I left, about the silence I had carried with me for years. The words came slowly, like steps across uneven ground. Then they came faster. Writing reminded me who I was before I began to disappear. It reminded me of the girl who once had dreams, who once believed her words were worth something. I was learning that healing does not always feel like light. Sometimes it feels like dust settling after a storm. Marek and I continued our walks. We still said little about the past. We did not need to. We understood that healing was personal and that being kind to each other was enough. One afternoon, he brought me a small box of berries. I washed them and ate them slowly while standing at my window. I felt something soft open inside me. Some days I felt strong. Other days I still felt unsure. I had moments when I wanted to run again, not because I was scared, but because staying still felt unfamiliar. I reminded myself that strength is not about never falling. It is about standing up again, even if slowly. One cold evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. It was from a family member back home. Inside was a photo of a wedding. He was in the picture. He looked happy. There was a woman next to him. I stared at the photo for a long time, but not with sadness. I felt no jealousy, no anger, just a soft kind of distance. That photo made something clear. His story had moved on, and so had mine. In a different direction, but with the same right to continue. I placed the photo in a drawer and went to make tea. I did not need to carry old ghosts anymore. Summer came. The streets filled with light and laughter. My skin grew darker under the sun. I began to wear brighter colors. I started to take longer walks by the river. I sat in quiet parks and read stories written by people who had also started again. I felt connected to them, even if we had never met. I spent time with the older woman who had given me tea months ago. She taught me how to bake a kind of bread that needed hours to rise. I liked the waiting. It reminded me that good things take time, that softness does not appear overnight. I started submitting my stories to small magazines. Some said no. One said yes. The first time I saw my name in print, I held the page in both hands and whispered it aloud. My voice sounded stronger than before. At school, we prepared for a summer festival. The children made decorations, practiced songs, and painted signs. I helped them cut shapes and hang ribbons. On the day of the event, the schoolyard was full of music. Parents came with baskets of food. People danced. As the sun began to set, I stood near the fence and watched. I thought about the life I had left. I thought about the person I used to be. I had loved him once. That was true. But I had also stopped loving myself to keep that love alive. And in the end, love that asks you to disappear is not love at all. Now I was visible again, to others, and to myself. After the festival, I walked home with tired feet and a full heart. My room smelled of flowers. The children had given me a bouquet. I placed it in a jar on the windowsill. I watched the petals open under the moonlight. In my notebook, I wrote a single sentence. I am proud of the woman I am becoming. I stared at the words. Then I underlined them. Twice. The next morning, I received a message from the young woman I had helped months ago. She said she had found a job, that she had made a friend, that she was doing better. She thanked me for taking the time to speak with her. Her message made me smile. I had once been in her place, lost, afraid, unsure, and someone had shown me kindness. Now I had passed it on. By the time autumn arrived, the leaves turned golden and dry. The wind became sharper. I wrapped myself in a scarf each morning. I felt ready, not for something in particular, but for whatever came next. I did not know how long I would stay in this place, but I knew I would never return to the life I had left. That chapter was closed. What remained was the road ahead, and for the first time, I was not walking it in fear.